let's have a discussion for the first time on Backlash with Jake Turx, who is the chief political correspondent for Ami magazine. Very interesting guy. He got a little bit of coverage in February when he was the Jewish guy who asked Trump the long, involved question, and Trump didn't necessarily interpret it the right way. He's also the author of Stop, Drop, and LOL, how to safely roll from laughter to the comfort of your own straitjacket. So he's a humor guy, done a lot with kids in terms of education, even summer camps, and just an interesting guy. So let me say hello and happy #Cow Appreciation Day to Jake Turx.
That would be pretty long to fit into one hashtag.
Yes.
Especially if you include the to Jake Turx in the hashtag.
Well, you have a short name, only 8 letters. You probably are included at the end when people have only 150, when they have 151 characters in a tweet. No, 131. Is it 140 or 160? 140. And they can get in, they can still get in your name in there if they have 9 characters left. Good strategy there.
Yeah, so see, I am surrounded with the words fake news wherever I go, whether it's at work or whether it's preparing for work or whether it's trying to catch up on the news at night. Fake news is something I hear all the time. And just so that the two of us are not in any way accused of fake news, it's not chief political correspondent any longer. It's senior White House correspondent, and it's been the case since January of 2017.
Okay.
Previously chief political correspondent. Anyway, so I just wanted to correct the record, but okay, let's jump right into it.
Well done. I should have mentioned it's not only Cow Appreciation Day, but also the 17th of Tammuz. Jake Turx, as you probably saw from the pictures, is another observant Jew, and we're not going to talk about that unless we get to it somehow in a roundabout way. Yeah. But I can't wish you a happy #Cow Appreciation Day without mentioning.
Actually, Cow Appreciation Day, from what I understand, is a promotion by Chick-fil-A.
Oh, okay.
I'm trying to petition them to open a kosher restaurant, a kosher Chick-fil-A, just so that I can know what I've been missing out on. If anything, maybe not, but I don't know.
The coffee's pretty good, so you don't have to worry about missing out on that. I have gone in there in recent years, gotten a coffee, and I've gone to the bathroom there.
And it's chicken. It's like, just charge a lot more money and make people wait a lot longer to prepare it, and that's it. Just have a rabbi.
It makes sense. The problem would be, assuming it's closed on Shabbos, it would also have to be closed on Sunday because that's the company policy. I don't know how they'd work it. Maybe they'd make an exception if they opened it up in Lakewood, New Jersey, or Borough Park, Brooklyn, or something. I don't know, but that would make it probably financially unviable, or it could be owned by non-Jews and potentially still open on Friday night, Saturday at least. I don't know. I don't know how it would work, but I like your picture of you dressed up like a cow in there.
A holy cow.
Yeah, very good.
That's that.
Very good. And do you have any thoughts on appreciation of cows beyond the Chick-fil-A tie-in there? I mean, whether it's
look, either you tip the cow or the cow tipped its hat. The photo that you're referencing that people can imagine in their own minds, right through the radio and podcast waves. They can visualize a guy dressed with a bekisha, a Hasidic frock that has a cow pattern on it, and he's tipping a shtreimel, a for Hasidic, non-Chabad Hasidic hat, and that is the cow tip, which is where you tip where the cow tips his hat to you instead of you tipping the cow over when he's sleeping. So that's my thought. It's a very unpolished and unrehearsed thought. So
we like unpolished and unrehearsed here. But you know what? That would make a good T-shirt. It'll go well with my Chabad of Antarctica shirt, or that I've given to people with penguins in the shtreimels going into a mikveh in the Antarctic. And the goal with a lot of shirts like that is to have one half of the people not sure if it's true or not. And only half the people knowing it's a joke are often the best kinds of jokes, in my opinion. The producers here have those jokes.
And I bet a lot of penguins wouldn't know either. So
right.
you get double bang for your buck over there.
Okay, I want to stick with things that are currently trending on Twitter and get a little more serious for a second. We'll go back to being goofy in a few minutes, don't worry.
Sure.
But I saw Sebastian Gorka is trending now.
Yes,
even though all he did was appear on a TV show, but any excuse to smear people who are, anti-jihad and pro-Israel as Nazis seems to work for the left. That's how desperate they are. And you did an interview with Sebastian Gorka recently. You wrote an article in Ami magazine about it, and I wanted to give you a chance to talk about him and the issue there at all, a little bit.
An article, by the way, which he himself confirmed on Twitter, I believe it was, that he said it was the most comprehensive interview he's ever given about his background and his family and his ties to an alleged group that has been causing him a lot of grief, and one that people have been hounding him about, and one that he didn't want to talk about.
Before you get into that, though, let me just make sure I have this right. What is online for Ami is like a small part of the article, and then you have to actually subscribe to the magazine, just so in case people
it's a subscription. Subscription is like $4 a month. Mm-hmm. You break it down, it's like 20 cents a day or whatever. I mean, my math stinks, but it's probably, if it's $4 a month, it's going to be somewhere less than $4 per day. Significantly less than $4 a day, if you break it down. So it's really not that expensive. Mm-hmm. Even if you buy like for a whole year, it's like $45 or something like that for an entire year. And we put out 50 issues. That's every week, with the exception of the week of Passover, the week of Sukkot. So
gotcha.
So you could read like the first page or two, and then if you want to see the entire article, you could just take a monthly subscription. But anyway, so it was supposed to be the comprehensive tell-all, everything's on the table, and he answered every question, and it wasn't easy for him because a lot of them were allegations about his parents who are no longer with us, and it was something that was very emotional for him. But he felt that he had to finally get out and set the record straight because he felt there was a lot of misinformation and slander and doctoring of facts, according to him, that he wanted to clarify. So if you have anything specific about my exchange with him, I'd be very happy to address that based on what he had told me.
Well, I'd like to know about his history, and I already know this. This is for the benefit of the listeners. What specifically went on with the medal of the, and if I'm pronouncing it wrong, I apologize, Vitezi Rand?
Yeah, you know what? It's actually a lot better than the way I pronounced it, like my first 20 times. Vitezi Rand. Yeah, you got it. You got points for that. So actually, the timing of the interview was very interesting because a rumor had just been circulated like a day or two prior that he had been fired by the Trump administration. And he gave 2 interviews that day, one to Ami magazine and one to Fox Radio. And he basically broke the story to us that not only had he not been fired, but he had received assurances that he is, in fact, not being asked to step down at all. So I got to break that news. I broke it on Twitter, which is where everything that is break-worthy gets broken. And that's how that went down.
I assume you're a big fan of his work against jihad and for counterterrorism?
I don't really I don't use the term fan in describing any kind of affiliation or allegiance to any individual politician or party or ideology. I just like judging things on the overall value without looking. I mean, sometimes I'll be very impressed by just the sheer chutzpah that a politician has, and even if everything they say is false, it would just impress me that someone can lie outright. Not going on Gorka. I'm just saying what I look for and what impresses me is not something that I have my own weird metrics of how I judge things. Mm-hmm. So having said that, you wanted me to give a rundown of the Vitezi Rand, and why people justifiably were concerned about him,
Yes, please.
and how he was able to, or how he responds to those people. So the Vitezy Rend is a group that was created by Miklos Horthy, who was the regent of Hungary. Essentially, he was the king without a crown, dictator, so to speak. And he created this group shortly after World War I to honor heroic Hungarians, who based on a number of criteria. And as World War II came along, and Hungary aligned itself with the Nazis, Horthy, who was a Nazi but not enough of a Nazi to collaborate directly with the Germans to send Jews to the concentration camps, which is what caused the Germans to have to take over the country in 1944 and do it themselves, is that, the context is so important because when you look at Eastern European politics, it is very complex. In America, it's like, okay, you got the Democrats, you got the Republicans, you got the conservatives, you got the liberals. And it's that simple. In Eastern Europe, when you have parliaments of multiple parties, you have people who switch affiliations and allegiances, and sometimes people jump along on certain things because it's good now, and then they oppose it. Everything is so much more nuanced. So,
great point.
Was Horthy a Nazi? Was he not a Nazi? It's a question that can be answered in many different ways. It's not a black and white question, is what I'm trying to say.
Right.
And one point that he makes is that there was this gentleman whose name I'm not going to try pronouncing because it's a rather long name, who he says was not only was he a honoree of the Vitezy Rend movement, but he was also I think it was the defense minister of Hungary at some point. And this guy was actually a Jew. So he was pointing out that Jews had been awarded even during the Nazi rise to power. And okay, so then World War II comes to an end, and eventually the communists take over. And then when the communists take over, the Vitezy Rend is outlawed, it's banned, because they want to quash Hungarian independence and nationalism. So Vitezy Rend is made illegal. In 1956, the uprising of the communists. Dr. Gorka's dad is, I guess, part of the opposition to communism, and for his troubles, he is thrown into a prison by the secret police. He's tortured for a while. Eventually, he manages to get to England. Now, like the 1970s or something, like many, many years later, this new group opens up a Vitezy Rend offshoot in exile. And what they do is they honor people who fought against communists. And so these people are giving out medals and awards to people like Dr. Gorka's dad, who had suffered while opposing and actively taking charge during the uprising. And so they give him this medal, which has been in his family for the past many decades. During one of the inaugural balls of President Trump's inauguration, he felt, as a way of honoring his family, he would wear this medal on his chest. People recognized it. People said, hey, the guy who created this organization originally was a Nazi collaborator, and a lot of the people who had been awarded this in the 1940s were people who collaborated with the Nazis, and people were very, very concerned and upset that somebody would actually wear this in public, something that they interpreted to be a sign of fascism.
Yeah, and of course, people would not be offended if they had done something similar related to, say, I don't know, Joe Kennedy or al-Husseini, who was Yasser Arafat's uncle, who were also, to different degrees, Nazi collaborators, or at least sympathizers.
So, every case has to really be weighed on its own merits, because Republicans have always said, well, if it would have been a Democrat, well, if it would have been a Republican.
Right.
So we don't really, each case has to examine one by one. You know what? It's very likely that if Dr. Gorka would have come out that week and given and opened himself up to the media, perhaps he would have been able to significantly and convincingly explain this entire, the whole history behind it and show that he has nothing to hide. The problem is, and one of the things I pointed out to him, I said, look, you have a lot of people who work for the Trump administration that, or at least this was the case early on. We had a lot of people where, like, we didn't know much about them. We didn't know where they're coming from. We didn't know what their agendas are. So here we have this British guy who's Hungarian, who was one of the leaders of a Hungarian, what is considered right-wing Hungarian political party. And he's this scholar, or claims to be a scholar, against terrorism, takes a very unusually hardline approach for someone in the position that he's in. He's a deputy assistant to the President of the United States, and he's wearing this mysterious medal that gets people wondering, what is this? Where did he? They said, there's this aura of mystique around you that, if you don't talk about it, only keeps on festering and multiplying, right. and people just get more and more concerned. The longer you go, the more stories just end up being embellished and stuff. And he and what he responded was, he said, and I don't think this actually made it into the final version of the interview, because it was a really long interview. We had to cut it down for space. So he said, I don't think I'm mysterious at all. And I said, of course you don't think you're mysterious. You know yourself. Nobody else really knows much about you.
Right.
Why do you, and the reason I was asking the question that way I was saying, why should people not be frightened given the fact that you have all of these questions surrounding you and you've never addressed it before? Right. Like, do you really blame? And he was complaining about some media outlets that were writing, some of them were writing a few articles a week just about him, and he was saying, oh, they're making so many things up. And I said, well, what would you expect from them if they're really, really concerned? And the longer you go without answering, the more concern they have. So anyway, that was that part of that conversation.
And I wonder, by the way, if some of it is just resentment among the media, among the pro-Linda Sarsour types, and you know what I mean there, and we'll get into her very soon.
Sure.
And just a resentment of Hungary, which is taking a tough line against the so-called refugees. It's Hungary, it's the Czech Republic, it's the Poland. They would, I'm sure those in the media and on the left would prefer someone who has a much more sophisticated Swedish or French or, well, maybe not French, or English or type of view. You know exactly what I mean there. All right, but speaking of Linda Sarsour, I want to go to just something you just tweeted about. You are just shocked by that people are still indulging Linda Sarsour right now. I think it was just one tweet of yours, but it did catch my eye when you put that up. And her latest call for jihad against President Trump. Yeah.
So actually, see, here's the thing about Sarsour. People, I mean, she's a very, very wise woman. Mm-hmm. And she's very calculated. She knows, and we know, that the application of the word jihad, the way she used it, was not meant to say we are going to take arms and physically attack the White House. Mm-hmm. We understand that the context that she used it in, we know what she meant. But here's what is so interesting about what she did, and she had a prepared speech. So she wasn't just speaking and just misused the word. She planned it out. Mm-hmm. And what's very clear is that she does talk about and I'm not quoting her directly because I don't have a speech in front of her, but she talks about a permanent dissent. Mm-hmm. And she somewhat even bullies anybody who dares not take a very, very active role in dissenting against the government. She calls our government fascist. And we're talking about a democratically elected president. So she's basically saying that the democratic system is fascist. She called our government. She used a few other such terms, white supremacists. Specifically, she said white supremacists in the White House. She talked about Islamophobes, which I guess that is probably something that she would be justified in. But she, in various ways, used the kind of terminology that suggested that she wasn't really calling for anti-violence, but she just said the word anti-violence so that she can later say, look, I said I'm anti-violence. But she used some very maybe racially charged terminology and manipulative kind of terminology that like and either you're with us or you're against us kind of thing, and how dare you turn your back on your people kind of thing. And
she's so calculated.
Right. But here's the thing. We can't fit all that into a tweet, but we could fit jihad into a tweet. And she wanted that to be the story. She wanted the word jihad to be what everybody discusses the next day, so that she could say, hey, look how stupid and narrow-minded the conservatives are, because they're saying that I said I wanted to wage jihad. All I'm saying is we want to have this internal struggle for perfecting ourselves before Allah. And fact of the matter is, sure, that's what she meant, but she crafted it in a way. And now
it's
what
like,
if she didn't?
Jake, it's like 15 years ago, the graduation speech at Harvard by a student was called My Harvard Jihad. And it's all about normalizing the term, just like it's like normalizing wearing the hijab as a symbol of feminism at the Pussy Hat March. And these people are so calculating. That's the impression I get.
But you know what? I mean, here's the thing. I have no problem with internal jihad. I have no problem with wearing a hijab. I mean, as someone who dresses up like what people would describe in the most polite terms as a black and white clown, I am very, very happy, and as an American, very happy to support anybody's right to wear anything on any part of their body, practically, especially including a hijab for religious purposes. I'm so fine with that. I'm fine with the term jihad. It's just the fact that she used it in a way that could, in such an insightful and manipulative manner, just to rile people up. It's the kind of thing that we have to be very much on the alert for. And the problem is that we're talking about it. It's the kind of thing where you have to talk about, which means that she wins. And it's the same thing. I draw a parallel between when President Trump tweeted out that everybody at the G20 was talking about.
I was just thinking the same thing. The exact same thing.
So exactly. So he wills it into being. He creates something just because he willed it to be created. And that's what she's able to do. She's able to create a narrative by creating the narrative. But the narrative didn't have to exist. But it only exists because we allow it to exist, because she made it exist, which it wouldn't exist without us agreeing to go along with her. It's complicated, but it's strategy that we actually are starting to see some conservatives starting to learn how to use. But it's strategy that has been used more effectively by people who are more tuned into messaging, people with a Hollywood background, which generally tend to be on the left side of the proverbial aisle.
Yep. Another thing you tweeted about recently took place in your hometown, I guess, of Lakewood, New Jersey, and how eagerly people are talking about a certain welfare fraud case, and you noted that eagerness on Twitter yourself, and you talked about what went on. Maybe you can give a little background for people who don't know what I'm talking about.
So basically, so what happened was there were people who had misreported what their earnings were, and they were getting government benefits when they were making more money than they should have in order to be able to get those benefits. I'm not really qualified to talk about the case. I don't know much about it. I cover national politics. I don't cover local or state politics.
Right.
But one thing that I will say, and this is just an observation of myself just as an individual. I don't say this on behalf of anybody. Yada yada, et cetera. All disclaimers taken into account. Very good. Is that the way it's been portrayed is that there's this massive scam that's been going on, and millions of dollars have been stolen from the government. It seems like a lot of people were in cahoots with each other, and they were planning and plotting and conniving to try to rip off as much money as they can. When you break it down, when you look at the actual individual cases, you'll see one person is being one pound is being charged from 2008 to 2010, another is being charged from 2011 to 2014. These are individuals. Each one, some of them was with welfare, some of them was food stamps, some of them was Medicaid, some of them were a combination of them. completely unrelated, except for the fact that they're all Orthodox Jews. And when you look at it, it's like, he stole $47,000 over the course of 3 years. And you say, okay, if you mug someone and you steal $47,000, I guess that's a lot of money. But when you look at a family with a lot of kids, and $47,000 is maybe healthcare, and if you have a special needs child going to school, that could cost a lot of money. So it looks like, wow, the guy stole $150,000 over 7 years, and it's like, it all went to tuition for this child. It's not like they're stealing money and they're involved with the mafia and it is, the prosecutor's office, the prosecutor's job, essentially, is to justify his paycheck by making every case the biggest case possible. The media's job is to sell papers and to make every story look like it's the biggest story that ever happened. So that's really what goes on. So from the media angle, I can say how it was misreported, but from a legal standpoint, I don't know what happens at this point. I would have assumed if someone didn't report, like if you underpay your taxes, they don't send the FBI to your door. They send you a bunch of letters and interest, starts piling up, and they give you time. They agree to work with you. So I'm not sure what's different over here, where they just march in, drag people out of their homes, put them in handcuffs. They set a court hearing, and then they're home without bail. It's not even like they have to sit in jail or anything.
Yep.
So
the DA might be ambitious. Who knows?
Yeah. So it could be some of it was just to make a statement, to frighten people, to maybe raise awareness. It's possible that a lot of people weren't aware of the laws of what needs to be declared and what doesn't, and how it doesn't, and sometimes it could be a matter of, you're $500 over and you didn't declare those 500. You were ineligible, and now we're building this case as if you stole $57,000. So it could be something as innocuous as that, or it could just be people who made a tough decision, a wrong decision based on personal financial hardship.
Speaking of your Twitter account, which people can find at Jake Turx, JakeTurx, I really liked the way you phrased one other thing. This is probably the last thing I will bring up from Twitter. You wrote, and you know what you wrote this about? Certain things just cannot be faked. And I think you wrote this just 2 days ago.
Yeah. At the risk of coming across as supporting the president, I chose to tweet out a video that NBC News had tweeted, and I tweeted it a few minutes after they did. It was like right after they did it. It's not like it was the kind of thing where you would retweet something like a couple of hours later. It was like they retweeted it almost like if it was a few minutes apart, which is basically the president walking towards Marine Force One. Very windy. The cover, as it's officially called, as I now know from the comments on that particular thread, his cover falls off. President bends down, picks it up, goes over to the Marine, taps him on the shoulder, puts it back on his head, falls off a second time. President turns around, he bends down, he's about to pick it up, and then I'm not sure who, someone else was accompanying him, ends up picking up the hat, and then the president walks back over to the Marine and taps him back on the shoulder, and it was and so what I actually, part of the tweet, and I can't check the exact wording because I'm on the same phone that I would have used to check my Twitter. I said, I used some kind of phraseology to suggest something that I would never have expected. This is something that I just wasn't expected. And people were like, oh, come on, you just because you hate Trump, you're saying. So then anything you're right, everyone's going to hate you no matter what. So I was saying, no, I've actually never in my entire life seen a world leader do this, any world leader ever, for any reason. So it's not an anti-Trump line. It's just I've never seen Angela Merkel or Zachary Taylor or Rutherford B. Hayes or Woodrow Wilson or Adolf Hitler or and no comparison. And I have to say, because I mentioned his name earlier, Nicholas Horthy. None of these people, as far as I know, would have actually bent down and picked up a hat of a soldier and rather of a Marine and and humbly put it on his head. I thought it was a very touching moment that I was very inspired by.
Back to something you wrote recently, I think your most recent piece in Ami magazine, and we had started talking about fake news jokingly at the beginning of this discussion.
Right.
You had an article called "News Fakers" regarding Time magazine and the president, and maybe you could tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, that was probably 2 weeks ago already. Basically, Time had this problem where they were saying that there were a few covers of Time magazine with Trump's picture on the cover that were inauthentic. Mm-hmm. And they were magazines that were appearing on people's wall, like people were framing it, and some, it seemed some Trump golf courses had hung them up or were giving out commemorative covers or whatever it was. And they were showing people how to spot a fake Time magazine cover. Part of what was so interesting about the story was that from both angles. One angle was the fact that Time actually has to tell the readers how to spot a fake cover, so that they shouldn't, God forbid, be fooled. But they also went on to say that Trump had only been featured on the cover once before he announced his candidacy, and since then he's been featured, I think, 13 or 14 times. So from Time magazine's perspective, it's like you featured the guy 14 times. It's not like they're taking, they only featured Adolf Hitler's Man of the Year once, but it's not like they're taking somebody that was never on the cover. I don't know, maybe Justin Bieber or someone. I'm sure he was, but let's say he hasn't been, and people put it on, everyone thinks it's real. That's one thing. But someone who's been on your cover 14 times, that you wrote about that in your own article. Why would you be so touchy about the fact that there's a fake cover about it? That's a question on Time. Another question on the Trump people. You have 14 professional covers to choose from. Can't you just find one of them?
Right. At this point,
and if you can find one of them, can you at least tell the Time photographer what you want them to do next time? I mean, can you try to work it out together? Like, what is it that they got it wrong 14 consecutive times and you never said anything, but instead you just went to Photoshop and just put out a cheap copy that Time tells you in 16 different ways how to spot? So I thought it was just a really strange story. There are a few other aspects of the story that I don't remember all the details offhand, so I'm not gonna elaborate further. But I thought it was a really funny story.
Yep. One other thing you wrote about recently, I'm going to ask you about. It's your interaction with the embassy of Azerbaijan, which is kind of a unique country, and people don't know that much about it. And this is a good opportunity for them to learn more.
Yeah. The Jewish community in Azerbaijan dates back to either it definitely predates the Khazar Empire, which the famous empire that converted to Judaism around year 600-700, and so they were around before then. Some people claim that they were around the times of the Second Temple. Actually, no, between the First and Second Temple is when people moved out there. So it is a country with a very long and sustained and unique Jewish community. And the interesting thing about Azerbaijan is that it's a Muslim country. It is one of only 3 Muslim countries in the world that are predominantly Shiite. The other 2 being Iraq and Iran. They are Iran's northern neighbor, but don't let that fool you, because they are considered the Muslim country with the closest ties to Israel. And they are also very, and this is something that it seems throughout their history. Right when they became a republic right before the Soviets invaded, and then when they were granted independence again in the early 90s, is that they've always made sure to treat all religions fairly and equally. So if the government will approve the building of a mosque, they will also try to go ahead and approve a building of a synagogue and a church. Well, obviously there are so many more Muslims. It's not. You wouldn't have 450,000 synagogues if you have 450,000 mosques.
Right.
But
I get your point.
Right.
As many as anyone would need.
Right. As many as they feel is necessary. And so the one of the schools in the capital of Baku, which I had visited together with Vadne Yisrael, an organization that has schools in a few Eastern European countries. And this school is actually in a state-of-the-art, beautiful 4-story building that the government donated and maintains and upkeeps. And there's a lot of collaboration between the community and the government. And it's a feel-good story from a country that, like I said, Iran's northern neighbor. They're right in the middle of it all. And they can just go along with whatever's taking place in the region. And they choose not to. They choose to be a beacon of tolerance and understanding and acceptance right in ISIS's and Iran's own backyard. So it's just such an inspiring story. And the ambassador is a very fascinating fellow. So and we featured him on the cover of Ami.
They had a Hanukkah party last year, didn't they?
And
I remember why it was. I can't remember why it was publicized, but they had it. I know why. It was at the Trump Hotel in Washington.
Yeah, it was at the Trump International Hotel. It was on the same day that Obama had his Hanukkah party, which actually was like 2 weeks before Hanukkah. Yeah. There were the ambassadors of 15 countries were invited, including the most fascinating of all, the Greek ambassador. Which you always want to meet a Greek ambassador at a Hanukkah party and say, hey, check the scorecard. One zip.
Well, you could say the same thing about Syria, too, I guess.
Yeah, but the Greeks invaded Syria. It's not like the United States is not North Dakota just because North Dakota is in the United States, you know.
Right. Yeah, but hey, frankly, we know it was a civil war. Probably a lot of more leftist members of the Israeli government would have been just as inappropriate. But we're not going to get into Hanukkah right now. In fact, let me ask you about another, unless I cut you off there before you finish the story, I do want to ask you, we have only a little time left, about, just because we're interviewing today, a certain Jewish observance which is much less known than Hanukkah, the 17th of Tammuz, which you and I are both fasting today.
Correct.
About, maybe you could just end with a little bit about what that is.
It is like many of the mournful, sad days. It is related to the temple destruction, and on the 17th day of Tammuz was when, from what I understand, and I have not studied the matter recently, I believe the outer walls of Jerusalem were breached for the first time.
Second time, wasn't it? Second temple? Wasn't it the second?
Yeah, right. But it was breached for the first time. They had finally broken through the wall. And there was hand-to-hand combat in the streets for a couple of weeks, which culminated with Tisha B'Av, as described in Josephus. So the Mishnayos in tractate Tainus in the Talmud lays out a few tragic events that took place on the 17th day of Tammuz. Each one, in and of itself, would warrant a fast day. I guess fortuitous for us fasting people that all of those calamitous events happen on the same day, because if you had them spread out on various days, we would have a Ramadan on our hands practically. Because a lot of really tragic things happened on the 17th of Tammuz, and also a lot of tragic things happened throughout history on the 6th day of Av, which is also a fast day. So,
ninth day of Av. Ninth day.
What did I say?
6th day of Av.
For all you keeping track, do not, under any circumstances, unless advised by a physician, fast on the 6th day of Av. Right. Actually, my Hebrew birthday is on the 6th day of Av.
Oh, mine's the 8th of Av. Funny. Brutal week to have a birthday, but unfortunately our secular birthdays sometimes aren't during those 9 days. Okay, we're getting too serious here.
Yeah, so I guess I was being a little bit narcissistic in assuming that the day I was born was going to be a fast day because me. So I made it all about me. Which is pretty sad in its own way, but not sad enough to warrant the fast day.
Well, happy early birthday. And by the way, it's also the day, if I'm not mistaken, that Moses broke the tablets 40 days after he ascended to Mount Sinai, among other bad things in Jewish history. Yeah. All right. People can follow you at Jake Turx, at JAKETURX.
You're not going to give yourself out a shout-out, Mr. Taxin?
Well, they know me by now, so... I am going to give Ami a shout-out. Yeah, sorry, I thought you said something else.
I just thought you'd take the opportunity to...
You can see it online, and you can read the whole articles if you actually subscribe to it for approximately 13 cents a day. Did the math while
you did that. You had your fact checkers on that story. Good.
Anything else people need to know before I let you go?
I don't. You know, I was not told this was going to be on the test. To be very honest with you, I was told that as soon as you say Ami Magazine, over. And now you're telling me that I need to have a closing statement. I did not come prepared with a closing statement. So I'm just going to say, I want to wish everybody that if you're ever in a position where someone puts you on the spot and asks you to provide and produce a closing statement, you should always have something right at the ready.
And we give him a pass today because he's been fasting, as I have since sundown yesterday.
Or you can give me a fast because I've been fasting. Whatever works.
Yeah, all good. Great having you on, Jake. Hope to have you on again.
All right, Leah, we'll do it again. No worries.
All right. Happy early birthday.